Hello, everyone. We're so glad that you could be with us this afternoon. We're starting just a few minutes after, but that's okay. We're here amongst friends so we can mingle and get to know one another. We greatly appreciate you being with us. This is an exciting day to be able to have this space. And we're so thankful to be able to pay homage to the folks that helped us get here. We're also excited today to have our executive director from the state, Ms. Karen Brinson Bell, who's going to be giving us a whole bunch of great information. And so, one thing that we call it a lunch and learn, we did want to touch, something that we're all thinking about is the photo ID that's coming up, and so that we hope we can get some information to you that will be helpful to our different department heads too. I'm going to miss somebody, so I just want to say welcome to all of you. We're so glad to have our board members here, so many, our county commissioners, our mayor is here with us today. We're thankful to have him as well. With that, I'm going to ask Reverend Dan Duke if he would come and do the invocation, and then we're going to start to eat, and then we'll move on from there, okay? Thank you all. Thank you.
Let us pray. O Lord, our governor, bless the leaders of our land, that we may be people at peace among ourselves and a blessing to other nations of the earth. To the President and members of the Cabinet, to governors of states, mayors of cities, and to all in administrative authority, grant wisdom and grace in the exercise of their duties. To senators and representatives, and those who make our laws in states, cities, and towns, give courage, wisdom, and foresight to provide for the needs of all our people, and to fulfill our obligations in the community of nations. To the judges and officers of our courts, give understanding and integrity that human rights may be safeguarded and justice served. And finally, teach our people to rely on your strength and to accept their responsibilities to their fellow citizens, that they may elect trustworthy leaders and make wise decisions for the well-being of our society, that we may serve you faithfully in our generation and honor your holy name. Amen.
Amen. So, I'm Karen Brinson Bell. I'm the State Elections Director. I've been in this role since June of 2019. And what I want to touch base on is sort of how I connect the work that I do now with having been a county elections director. And prior to that, I was in a district role, which is a position we've brought back to help all the counties, whether they have vacancies and need to elevate a new person into the role, or whether it's to help us be as uniform as possible. And so I'm very excited that folks in those roles, Laura Dell is the SST, Security and Support Technician is what we call them, but she and I also worked together when we had these district positions way back when as district election technicians. I think SST is a cooler name. It's supersonic transporter, if nothing else. I remember one of our IT folks, that's what they thought that it meant. And I was like, well, it's pretty cool. We might go to that. But to have county folks here and supporting each other, it's an aspect that we've really tried to build out. 17 years plus in this field, and we call ourselves an elections family. And when people retire from serving, move into other roles, we always talk about that they're still our elections family. And when I came into this role, knowing that we were I didn't realize what kind of changeover we would have. 2019 was a big year for us, but it was because we needed to certify new voting equipment. It was because we had the state board call for a new election in Congressional District 9, something that was unheard of. And what kind of questions did that raise for the public? And so we launched a voter confidence campaign so that they would understand why we were certifying new voting equipment, why we were calling for a new election, and to try to tell our story. And we did it around a hashtag, YourVoteCountsNC, and then, and started promoting that, not realizing what we would go through in 2020. And so, I just knew what doing a presidential election meant no matter what. It's a lot of work, and you do it, you prepare for it 18 months out or more, really 4 years out, because the day you certify one, you start on the next. And you have other elections going on in the midst of that. And so we talked about the roles of a team and how we all have our roles. And, I am no gifted athlete, but I am a huge sports fan. And everybody has to put up with that. And y'all are going to have to today, too. Because we spent a lot of time talking about, when you draw out plays, and see all those hashes and X's and so forth on a whiteboard for a football team, it's because if they don't run the play quite right, if the running back doesn't go where he needs to, if they don't protect the quarterback, if they don't, do all those things as an offensive line, then, the quarterback's going to get sacked or the running back's going to get hurt or whatever it might be. And so recognizing that you've got to have your role defined is so important in what we do, in anything. And so we spent a lot of time talking about that and the importance of working from the same playbook and being on the same page with each other in our offices, but as a state. And so we started referencing ourselves as Team 101. And that was my commitment to the counties, that the state recognized that we can't do elections at the state level without the counties. And we wanted them to know that they were not going to have to do elections without the support of the state. And so we see ourselves as this symbiotic relationship. You got to have each other. And that's how we say Team 101. It's 100 counties and one state board working in unison. And, part of the reason why that's so significant are the changes that have happened in our profession. Laura and Kim have been in this longer than I have, not much. And we started when we were 12, just so everybody knows. And we've seen it evolve. But people who preceded us, we've seen that evolution from them even more. Most of the time, when you had an elections office, even back in the 80s, it was a clerical position. You still had typewriters. You typed up a voter registration card and put it in this gigantic Rolodex machine called a card bearer. And let me tell you, I sold the one in Transylvania County where I was county director. Whoa, I don't think that moving company knew that they were getting into to try to move that piece of equipment. But it also often meant that there were a lot of part-time offices, and it was women who, were often stay-at-home moms who could work part-time, get the election ready, roll out the wooden ballot boxes, things like that, the master lock with the universal key, all these things that, in that time and place were fine. But that's not where we are, and that's not how we've evolved. And so, as we have evolved, it meant that in 1998, as part of the National Voter Registration Act, the state board created a centralized statewide voter registration database that all the counties could tap into and share information so that we knew if someone moved to Caldwell County that had lived in New Hanover County, that information could be exchanged and we could keep those records up to date, and that we would have digital files and so forth. We've taken all of those cards that were in those card bearers and rolled them into digital files so that that's up to date and accurate. But I mentioned that we did this in 1998. Now here's the hard part that I have to spend a lot of my time trying to advocate for, and we still want this state budget that we hope is going to give us that, is that system has never been modernized. So we had this system prior to smartphones, prior to GUI interfaces that give you pop-up windows and things. It looks like Atari, is what I've often said, and I still say. So imagine that and how we're trying to now process records for over 7 million registered voters in North Carolina. And think about how much our state has grown since 1998 and what that means. And in the midst of all of that, in 2006, we rolled out new voting equipment statewide. Every county did their own thing up until that point. And now I'm going to really date myself. Does anyone have or I'll date y'all. Does anyone have any idea why we did that in 2006? What might have been the catalyst for us to do new statewide certified voting equipment in North Carolina in 2006?
Hanging Chad.
Hanging Chad. No election official will ever name their child Chad. But we love our Chads. But that's what prompted that. And since then, North Carolina has led the way again. When we did that voter registration system centralized statewide, we were one of the first 3 states in the country to do that. In 2006, we were one of the first states to have a certified program for voting equipment, not just the federal standards that had been developed after 2000, but to also roll out a system that met state standards as well, and we were uniform in pricing, uniform in service, uniform in requirements, and we launched our program for logic and accuracy testing before every single election, and you are invited to go see it because I think it will ensure confidence in our processes once you see it, but you will also be bored to tears because we stand there and feed in ballots into those tabulators, every single one that's going to be deployed, every single spare that might be deployed, and we are going to test every single ballot style, every single position, and they're not going to have the same vote count because if they're all getting ones, then how do we know the machines are working correctly? So we have to do a test script that makes them different and unique and so forth. And so, we do that before every election. And then our law back then was one of the first to say you will do a post-election audit of your voting equipment. And so from 2006 until today, after every single election, our counties, Caldwell County and every single one in the state, is doing a post-election audit where we look at, we randomly select at the state level on that Wednesday following the election 2 voting sites. And if you're unlucky, you get your 2 largest early voting sites and wind up counting who knows what percentage of your vote. And the counties see it as you're lucky when you get your 2 smallest election day precincts. But it's random, and it ensures that we bring in bipartisan teams to count those ballots by hand and make sure that those tabulators work properly. And we've been doing that since 2006, and we still are considered one of the gold standards in the country for doing that. But just to touch on those 2 things kind of highlights for you how we have evolved in this profession and the different hats that we have to wear. That's a lot of technology. That's a lot of logistics. That's a lot of warehouse space that you never had to have before. That's a lot of additional training. And that's why what the commissioners did here is so important. Y'all wondered where I was going to get to with this, right? But that's why I wanted to get to this point, because you have illustrated that you see the value in that. The investment in making sure that there's a good training facility here, that the equipment is properly stored and secure. These are critical things. And I use the word critical because as of 2017, elections is part of our critical infrastructure in our country. And most people don't recognize that. But that's an additional hat that we wear. And we have to be on top of everything now. Physical security is heightened. Cybersecurity is heightened. We have to be knowledgeable about what a .gov address is and advocate for that with our IT partners. And they advocate back, We have to learn about phishing and smishing and things that sound more like hobbies than some sort of attack. But that's what we do now. In the midst of, finding voting sites, finding workers, because that's not as easy as it used to be, dealing with a growing population, trying to, ensure that we're compliant for those who have disabilities, and we need to make sure that our equipment is compliant for them, that our sites are compliant for them. And so, it takes a lot of skill to work in this profession, but it also takes an acknowledgement that going back to those roles, you may not be able to fill every role. You can't. Now, in Terrell County, she has to. Fewer than 2,500 registered voters. Most of our precincts have more voters, but you know, nonetheless, it's the importance of the roles. And when you realize that you may not have a strength in that role, recognizing what the partnerships look like, and being able to go to the commissioners and say, this is what will help us do our job better. Being able to look at the county IT department and say, you know, we need your help to protect our elections and to make sure that our sites are secure. It's working with emergency management and having emergency plans in place, whether it's hurricanes or ice. You know, both are part of election seasons. I'm not sure quite how we came to the decision that November and March are great times to hold elections. But, you know, it just adds some flavor to our job. And, you know, and so to that, commissioners, thank you. I've had to make that argument before. My first day on the job in Transylvania County, my predecessor did not have a good relationship with the county manager. And she challenged me to keep that defense up. I'm like, okay. I didn't. And I went and met with him. And he said, well, you know, what are your concerns? And I said, well, I'm familiar with where the voting equipment's stored, and I think we need to do something about it. And he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, have you never been where our voting equipment's stored? And he was like, well, sort of, yeah. I mean, I said, okay, well, it's right beside of a garage door in the lower portion of a building across the parking lot from our office. And there's a chain link fence around it. So every time the garage door goes up, there go the leaves. And now you've got like non-climate controlled, you've got dust particles flying everywhere, and you've got pieces of equipment that are $4,000 each getting leaf dust, pollen, and who knows what kind of humidity exposed to them. He goes, let's go see this. And off we went. And he made a call from that basement to maintenance that day and said, come put in a mini split and come put up some sheetrock. But it took advocating, being able to talk about our profession, talk about how it's to the benefit of the county as a whole. And, you know, ultimately, we had a conversation about why moving to a different facility was going to be better. Because we had a little tiny house. The Cub Scouts loved it when they came for their merit badges, because they're like, you work in the White House. And I'm like, yeah, we'll go with this. And I've always held a red phone case. Women don't understand. It's just so I can find it in my purse. But they were like, and she has a red phone. And I'm like, yeah. Kept, you know, Cub Scouts entertained. Like I'm trying to keep y'all entertained. But nonetheless, we talked about how, you know, we looked at things from a process improvement eye. We aren't just, you know, clerical people anymore. How can we do process improvement? How can we work smarter? And that's what we talked with the county commissioners about. That's what we talked with the county manager about. And they, at that point in time, this was 2015, made a $1.2 million investment to take an old jail. So Transylvania has the most secure voting equipment in the state. But to convert that into a facility for elections, to have a meeting space that could serve the community as well as training for the elections office, and a polling place for the elections office in that case, and understanding how to build a professional, dedicated operation. And so thank you for recognizing that investment too, and realizing the excellent work that the staff does in Caldwell County, headed by Chad. Not a hanging Chad, but, and they are a pleasure to work with. And I think that one other person needs to be recognized in the midst of all this, because while y'all made that investment, there's someone who drove you for many years to see the necessity of a state-of-art facility, having a secure space, and that is Fred Piercy. So thank you, sir. I think this is a very appropriate honor that this room, or boardroom, is named for you. So it's a pleasure. So that's where I'll leave it, at the importance of all of that, and hopefully have shed some light on, I could have brought a PowerPoint. There is a wonderful chart that shows you all these pie pieces that represent the ongoing work and the election day or election directly related work. But we do, I hope, have convinced you that we do work more than 2 days out of the year. If nothing else, there are enough campaign finance reports for us to audit pretty much any and every day. So I wanted to share that with you. And then Chad asked me to just touch on photo ID and curbside voting, since those are the learning topics of the day. If you haven't learned enough, maybe you did, maybe you didn't, we are in the process, well, I shouldn't say we are in the process, we have implemented. We have more to go, but we are actually conducting elections right now in the city of Charlotte and Sanford. And so those are our first two locations to implement photo ID. Several of us remember there was a different iteration of photo ID in this state, and the court struck that down and it just was removed completely. And so then we came back, there was a constitutional amendment put forward, and that was voted in favor of having photo ID, but that didn't tell us how to have photo ID. So the legislature did that. And that got tied up in court. So we were running in 2019. We had done 2 presentations in every county across, throughout the state on voter outreach. We had done a whole lot of stuff, and we had a court injunction. I was in the middle. My family comes in after Christmas Day to do the holidays, and I was cooking, and I got, can you come do an interview with WRL? Sure. Okay, so much for the comfy clothes. Let's put on a dress. So off I went. But that's how, we halted. We did everything we could to, just fix it where we could turn things on and off. But obviously, since that time frame, a lot has changed. So it's taken us a little bit to get everything rolled back out again. There have been a few different modifications by the decisions that came down. But it was in April that there was a decision by the state Supreme Court that we would put it in effect immediately. And so that's where we are. I think what's really key in how our law is written and what we are administering is that a voter is going to be able to vote in North Carolina with or without ID. And that probably shocks some of you. But I'll quickly explain, and the video will do a better job. But, we have numerous types of ID that have been approved for people to show. Primarily, most people will show a driver's license, but that's not something that everyone has. And so the law allows us to approve student IDs, so many student IDs have been approved, public government IDs, public employment, public services, there's some IDs there, some tribal IDs, variety of things that people will be able to show as their photo ID. There's also a free ID offered through DMV. Now, DMV's having their own vacancy issues, and so that's a challenge for them. But we also now have in every county office photo ID making equipment, and so anyone can come in. If you'd rather use that than your driver's license, you can get an ID. If you don't have an ID at all and need one, then as a registered voter in North Carolina, you can get an ID, or you can register and get an ID if that's what you need to do. So those are the provisions in place. But then we also have an exception form, so that if the ability to have, if you don't have transportation to get to the county board of elections or to a DMV, there are many counties in this state that do not have DMV offices at all. So that could be a burden. And so the law says we have a form where you can indicate your exception. And so that's a reasonable impediment. And there's a list of things that serve as a reasonable impediment. It may also be against someone's religion to be photographed. And so that's an exception. And then, because we're North Carolina and we have lots of natural hazards, there's always the possibility of having a natural hazard prevent you from getting your ID. So that's the third on the exception form. We might see that in use this year. Who knows? As long as you're from that affected area, obviously. And so that's where we are. We hope that when there is a state budget in place that we will get funding to help us do outreach to voters so that they understand the differences from the previous law, or just the fact that this is something that is now in effect. Because coming in and out of the courts for all these 4 years is difficult to make sure that they understand what will be asked of them when they present themselves to vote. And the poll workers will be looking for reasonable resemblance. It's not about everything on that ID matching up to what's in the voter registration. It's that, you know, you state that you're Karen Brinson Bell and you look like Karen Brinson Bell on that ID. I'm sorry if you do. So that's where we are on photo ID. And then curbside voting, I'm not sure what all you were planning to talk about with curbside voting, Chad, but it is one of my favorite programs, and we present nationally on this quite often because, believe it or not, some states don't do this. And so what curbside voting is that if someone can't go into a polling place, if they're unable to go into a voting site, then they have the option to pull up to a designated spot, and it's not the handicap spot, because there are folks who use a handicap space and still go into the facility. But they can't, for some reason, go in, and we don't ask them to show us their scar or bring us a note from the doctor. We take them at their word, they attest to it, that they are unable to go into the polling place, and they need a poll worker to be the feet for them. And so that worker brings out a clipboard, all this information, they attest that they can't, they get their ballot for them, they bring that to them, they vote right there from their car, and then the worker goes back in and puts it into the tabulator for them. That's curbside voting, and it's not drive-through voting. It's, you know, it's not for everyone. You're supposed to attest to it. As a matter of fact, the person who drives you there, if they're able to go into the polling place, they're supposed to go into the polling place and not try to curbside vote themselves. I know that sounds harsh. You know, maybe you have a Tesla and you can set it to the puppy dog setting or something and stay cool while that person goes in. But, you know, that actually was, you know, a game changer. The fact that we knew how to do curbside voting and had that in place in 2020 because of the pandemic. I will say, you know, probably my greatest professional achievement, and probably for my colleagues around the state, is the fact that we did not know, but DHHS came out with a report afterwards that said there was no link to voting in the spread of COVID-19. And that is exceptional. We went above and beyond, and the county folks especially put their lives on the line to not get COVID, so that they could make sure that people could exercise their right to vote. And sometimes it didn't work so well. Right up the road in Avery County, that whole staff got COVID the day before we were supposed to start early voting. And it's folks like Laura in our SST roles that made that come about. But needless to say, you can understand why curbside voting was so instrumental. Because North Carolinians like to show up to vote. Now, trust me, they like to show up on election day, but they really like to show up for early voting. And now, as it stands, that early voting period, it's not a partisan thing. I can show you the demographics, the breakdowns, but you know, we have about 60% of our ballots are cast during the early voting period, those 17 days leading up to the election, because it's simple. They just go, they find one, they don't have to worry if they're at the right polling place or not. All the ballots are available, and so any voter can go to those sites no matter where it is in the county. So those are two programs that Chad wanted to highlight today. Did I steal your thunder?
No, you're
Okay.
phenomenal.
Well, I will leave it at that, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Was that medium link?
That works.
Okay.
Perfect.
That tells me I went too long, but that's okay. I'm happy to answer questions. They'll tell you I do. I don't shy away from them. And y'all are lucky. I did a 1-hour radio interview yesterday.
Oh, my.
Yeah. Tune in. There's 40 affiliates that carry it if you want another hour of me. So,
Chair,
yes.
I'd just like to, I've been around for 11 years in this thing, and I'd just like to thank you for your good rapport with these directors. You've gone the extra mile to support them, and they love you for it. And I think that's your great strength, and I'd just like to thank you for it.
well, I appreciate it, but, you know, they're the front lines. And the best thing I can do, I told the state board staff, day one, we have 2 customers. First customer is the voter, the public. That's who all of us serve when you work in government. But the second are the counties. And that got some interesting looks. Because I also had to explain, they're our teammates, but they're gonna be our customers. Because, you know, at the end of the day, no matter what social media tells you, the ballots are not tabulated in my office at the state board, okay? they are in those 100 counties. They are in those precincts getting brought back to those counties. And so, you know, I don't know another way. I mean, it for whatever belief they have in me, I have it 100 times more because they, you know, they make us shine. So, thank you. All right, yay.
I guess if I could touch just on one quick thing is, Sharon's gonna say, I want to show you a video about the photo ID if you've got a few minutes. Sharon, will you come help make sure I do this right? But while she's coming to do that, I wanted to show just one thing. We have tried to improve, you know, curbside. We've got a couple things that we wanted to add to try to hopefully make our poll workers safer. And we were glad, thanks to the commissioner in our budget, to be able to purchase these. I know I can see many of think about our candidates that are out there. It's dangerous in that parking lot. And so we, it can be very dangerous in any parking lot, all our parking lots. So we wanted to make sure that they're as safe as possible, and we want it to look good too, but it represents our county as well. The other thing, and I think I was going to mention is, our maintenance crew, you know, we talked about, it is everybody. It's a team of all the county. It's amazing how many folks that we have to deal with, but we appreciate each one of them. And one of them is our maintenance, and they came out and put the, if you see those big green stakes out there in the parking lot, these are so our voters, our curbside voters actually can see the sign where they need to park, because we had an issue with that. We learned a lot in 2020 because we had so many curbside voters at that point. So we've tried to use that information and to make things even better at this point. So,
Yeah, just mention the fact that with that, we are staffing 2 people at each early voting site. They will be housed in the parking lot, and they will meet these people.
Yeah.
Home health nurses driving the people that we'll do outreach for.
Right.
And
If you want to
we'll put little guard tents out there so they can get out of the weather, but they'll be there permanently during the 17 days.
Yeah, to have them out there. That's right. Thank you, Bill. That is true. We have tried to make that a little bit better for the poll workers or curbside voters, but especially for the voters to have them out there, their presence, to try to help them with that.
And Chad, the most important thing about that, we've done that with save money.
Yeah, well, that's all we have tried to do that. That's true. We have tried to stay within the budget. That's right. Thank you. All right, Ms. Sharon, thank you so much. This video only takes just about 4 minutes there, if you guys will bear with us.
Beginning in 2023, a photo ID will be required to vote in North Carolina. For most voters, this will simply mean showing their North Carolina driver's license at the polls. There are many other identification options that voters can use to vote. These options are a U.S. passport or U.S. passport card, a state ID from the Department of Motor Vehicles, a North Carolina voter photo ID card, which can be obtained for free from a county board of elections, a college or university student ID that has been approved by the State Board of Elections, or an employee ID from a state or local government or charter school that has been approved by the State Board of Elections. Voters who have registered to vote in North Carolina within 90 days of the election are also allowed to present a driver's license or non-operator's ID from another state, District of Columbia, or U.S. territory. Voters aged 65 or older can use unexpired or expired versions of any of these IDs, so long as they were unexpired on the voter's 65th birthday. For all other voters, these IDs must be unexpired or expired 1 year or less in order to be accepted. There are 3 additional types of photo IDs that will be accepted at the polls, regardless of whether the ID contains an expiration or issuance date. They are a federally issued military or veteran ID card, a tribal enrollment card issued by a state or federally recognized tribe, or an ID card for a public assistance program that was issued by the state of North Carolina or a U.S. government agency. So what will the voting process look like with the new photo ID requirement? When you go to the polls to vote during early voting or on election day, the election official at the check-in station will ask you for your last name, followed by your first name and your residence address. Upon finding you in the voter registration database, the election official will ask for your photo ID. Election officials will confirm that you bear a reasonable resemblance to your photo ID. In other words, when the officials look at the photo on the ID you provide, they will decide if the photo looks similar enough to you that you're the person on the ID. Election officials are required to bear in mind that there are many reasons that a person's appearance could change. They'll also verify the name on the photo ID to ensure that it is the same or substantially similar to the name in your voter registration record. If a reasonable resemblance cannot be established by the check-in operator, supervising election officials from the polling place will meet and conduct a challenge hearing. If they do not unanimously agree that the photo does not meet the reasonable resemblance requirements, you will receive a regular ballot. Even if the supervising election officials unanimously determine that your photo does not meet the reasonable resemblance requirements, you will still have the opportunity to vote provisionally and will be provided additional instructions on how to satisfy the photo ID requirements prior to the county canvass. There are specific instances where voters will not be required to show a photo ID to vote. Voters who have a religious objection to being photographed, were victims of a natural disaster within 100 days of the election, as declared by the President of the United States or the Governor of North Carolina, or have a reasonable impediment preventing them from showing a photo ID, can complete an ID exception form and vote provisionally. Voters that do not qualify for any of the exceptions and cannot provide an acceptable photo ID at the time of voting will be offered a provisional ballot. After voting, an acceptable photo ID will need to be brought to the County Board of Elections office by the close of business on the day prior to the county canvass. The ID provided will be evaluated the same way a voter's ID is evaluated at the voting site. Do you bear a reasonable resemblance to your photo ID? And is the name on the photo the same or substantially similar to your name in the voter registration record? If you vote at home through absentee by mail, you will be asked to include a photocopy of one of the acceptable forms of ID or a completed ID exception form with your return ballot. For additional information on voter photo ID, visit the State Board of Elections website at ncsbe.gov or call us at 919-814-0700. You can also scan this QR code to visit the State Board's voter ID page. We look forward to seeing you at the polls.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Morris Reeves, and I'm a member of the Caldwell County Board of Elections. I did bring my 4-page, 30-minute sermon. But I'll veer off from that. I'm going to ask Bill to come up and join me. We have 3 appreciation to offer today. You know, there's so many people around us who are doing so much good and are due our words of encouragement. But I'll just start with 3 groups. And first, I'd like to say that as we go through life, you hear statements made that, and some people say that state super managers and bosses are considered a set of rude and people and just scold their subordinate. But I like to say that in reality that our boss is just the opposite. Our boss, the State Board of Election, go beyond the call to support their team. That's the all 100 North Carolina Board of Elections, to help us achieve performance above the level of bureaucracy. So the entire organization take this opportunity to thank you for all of your guidance, for all of your guidelines, for your memos, for your help and support to help us achieve grand success. Now, we're very fortunate and grateful to have a director at the state level like Karen Brinson Bell. Just think of her job. How would you like to have 100 different boards pulling at you, all at the same time, all in different directions? How would you handle that? How could anyone handle that? But we hope for just the opposite. We hope for 100 different boards provide her their support all at the same time. And I think I can speak for Caldwell County Board of Election and the entire staff that you have our support anytime it's required. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for your service. Thank you, Karen Bell.
You're too kind, thank you. And Laura's part of that operation, so thank you, Laura.
Also, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our Caldwell County Commissioners for your unwavering support of the Caldwell County Board of Elections. Your support means a lot to the board, the staff, and the entire community. Your support plays a major part in the board's being prepared to provide legal, fair, and safe election for all of its voters. To Chairman Church and the entire board and your staff, we appreciate you and we thank you.
During the 11 years I've been on this board, I've heard remarks at the state level about commissioner support. Minimal support, adequate support. But I've never heard anybody talk about maximum support. What we're getting here in Caldwell County now is all they got to give. And they're giving it to us in multiple ways, but it's all they got to give. With that level of support, we can compete with anybody. The larger counties have bigger staffs. It makes us very, very competitive. I may point out to you that there's 4 elements of that support. And it's not all money. Adequate budget. We get an adequate budget. It's very fair. Part of that, the next element would be budget flexibility. They allow us, they encourage us to save money. And then we can use that money for additional services. If it wasn't like that, we would have no incentive to save money. We wanted to do more for the handicapped. They had no objection to that. They encouraged that. We were able to save enough money to staff 2 workers in each of the early voting sites, uniforms, tents, whatever we need to have on-site services, valet parking for our handicapped people with money we saved, with technology we bought, with their support, used in ballot machines and printing costs. I just want to point that out. We couldn't do that without that flexibility. Staff multiply. We have 3 people. But that's not true. We have 500. We are part of their team. And they encourage her, and our manager, Donald Duncan, has been a great help too. They have encouraged their departments and employees to work with us. I see people here that go the extra mile for us. Our sheriff is one of the best ones in the country. He has given us good advice on security. Paige Caps, Paige, I can't see you over there hiding the camera. Her information people, we constantly disseminate information to the public. We need them and their TV station to do that, and they're there working with us. Our IT department, our maintenance department, we're basically still building a house here. We got major renovations got to go in the front here. We're waiting till this meeting was over and we'll start that. But they're giving us the facility we want and we're designing it. Problem solving. I will like to say, once a month, they're getting briefed by us 2 ways. Once a month. Chad at department head meetings, I give a report to my party's executive committee, which includes the 5 commissioners, on where we are, budgets, calendar, problems, staffing, all that. They get it once a month, and we get their feedback. It's a 2-way street. You don't have this without a 2-way street. Problem solving. I'm going to give you one example. They helped us buy Easy Cards. You're going to see them when you take this tour in a minute. We love them. They love them. With the Easy Cards, we are protecting this expensive equipment in transit to the 15 precincts and extending their service life. that saves them money. They like that. We're adding a new layer of security with the Easy Card. They're locked, inventoried, and sent out. Now the crux of the matter was, we didn't have a good way to get them out of here. During the renovations back here, they built a large door to get them out here. We couldn't get them out the front door here very well because it's a 36-inch opening in there. We got about 1/4 inch leadway, and those things are heavy. We tried to find a solution in the back of the building. How could we do that? We worked with the commissioners. We finally had to get an engineer here to look at those doors out there from this building they bought that they thought was weight supporting. We got it figured out. We put the double doors in there for the Easy Cards at their expense. And now those 15 Easy Cards on election day, they roll out of here really quickly. And the thing about those movers, they don't care about our equipment. They care about delivering that to them. And so when it's in there loose, you know how they would do it. It's very secure now. Everything's secure. They have encouraged us to be a leader in security, and the cameras all over this place. And we're working on having more security with cameras plus outside people. When election day comes, we'll have our curbside people out there full time with radios to the chief judge. If they see anything that needs to be reported, we know it instantly. We'd like to react to it immediately. We've got, I think, 2 commissioners here, Randy. I wanted to recognize Mike LaBrose, who couldn't come. Our Vice Chairman is very supportive. Jeff Branch, Commissioner Jeff Branch. Donnie Potter, who had a family event, he couldn't come, but I would say this about Donnie. Donnie Potter was out talking to our judges on election day like many of these do. Came to us and said, you need to do more about their pay. Send us a plan. They initiated it. We sent them a plan and they approved it. Now, that's the kind of cooperation, that is maximum support. So I'd like to ask if Randy, the chairman, and Robbie Wilkie could come up, and our chairman here is going to make a presentation. If you can just walk over this way and Jack, you want to? Bill? Go behind, get out of the way. We'd like to present this to our Caldwell County Board Commissioners. This is a plaque. It says, presented to the Caldwell County Commissioners by the Caldwell County Board of Elections. In great appreciation of your support, integrity, and dedication to the election process, Caldwell County. Thank you.
Thank you. Will be mounted on the wall in here. By county maintenance, I assume. So all the judges coming along, be trained in this room, will be able to see that and see your contribution.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I just want to say one thing, well, I can always say a lot. It has been an honor to be able to bring our Board of Elections along to where it is to this point. And we recognized that many years ago, and where we were at the county office, and kind of stuck in a corner and not a lot of room and various things that went on. And so we realized and knew that at that presidential election, business was going to be really booming for coming and voting, and to get the opportunity to move that facility to this location, and then being able to expand and be leaders in opportunities that we've had to bring our Board of Elections along. Because I think many times, and a lot of folks would take Board of Elections for granted till you needed them that year, you know, every 4 years in some of us' case, or every 2 years you were hearing about it, but we knew that we couldn't take them for granted. And Sandy Rich, former director, and had a big part in trying to bring elections along, and I just want to recognize her. I know she's not here, and all the things that she had
Yeah, get some tool, yeah. Thank you, Jim. I get some more.
Now, there's
clothes.
one other group. You may have noticed that there are guests from our District 3 counties. If we have directors from the District 3 counties, if you could please stand. And I'd just like to say this, that in the future, we're hoping that we can get our board members to join us in this. We're depending on you directors to kind of help us twist their arms and get them to be involved. I say this because you're the engine driving this vehicle. With your links to the county commissioners, to the state board of election, to the political parties, to the county sheriffs, to city police, and to other county boards, but not last but not least, to the voters of this community. We appreciate all that you do. We thank that your support, thank you for your support for long-term working relationship that you have shared with your boards. We really appreciate your strong commitment to being the best that you can be. Without you, we would not be where we are today. And we want to just thank you for your teamwork and your long-lasting support. And we thank you, we continue for that, and we thank you. Turn it back over to Chad to give you the tour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me, sir. Yep, so we're at the close. We thank you all for being here today. We appreciate, again, our county commissioners and, of course, our board. We appreciate Karen being with us and all of our distinguished guests that are with us today. If you'd like to take a tour, please make yourself at home. Grab some more dessert, something else to drink before you take off. I guess at this point we are adjourned, right, Mr. Chairman? Yeah. Thank you all again. Thank you again for all.